Our movie begins with David and his wife, Amy, as they return from a party at their family's house. It's clear that Amy has fallen asleep from exhaustion, while David is fighting off his fatigue to keep driving and get them home. Suddenly, a raccoon appears in the middle of the road. To avoid hitting it, David swerves off the main road, losing control of the car for a moment. At the last second, he manages to regain control and prevent an accident. The commotion wakes Amy up in a panic, and when she finds out what happened, she gets upset with David for risking their lives just to save an animal. She tells him that right before waking up, she was having a nightmare where he was trying to reach her and kill her. It's clear that David and Amy's relationship is very tense, especially after the death of their child, which led them to decide that they need to separate. After the incident, they realize they've taken a shortcut, but David keeps driving for a long time without getting back on the main road or reaching any destination, which makes Amy suspicious. Things get worse when David notices the car's engine has been damaged from the earlier accident. He finally admits to Amy that they're lost, which makes her even more frustrated. She pulls out a map to try and figure out where they are. After some driving, they come across an old gas station that looks abandoned because of the outdated equipment, but they are surprised when a worker comes out of the station. The worker asks what brings them there, and David explains that they have engine trouble and got lost, unsure how to get back to the main road. The worker offers to help fix the car, and after some effort he gets it running again. He then points them in the direction of the main road. David thanks him and continues driving as per the worker's instructions, but after a while, they realize they are still on a deserted road. David becomes increasingly unsure of what to do, especially since they're now on a remote path. Amy suggests they stay in the car and wait for someone to pass by and help them, but David refuses, arguing that the chances of anyone coming down such an isolated road are slim to none. He insists they need to walk back to the gas station and asks the worker for help again. At first, Amy refuses because of the long distance, but she eventually agrees after realizing they're out of options. The two of them walk back to the gas station, but this time, it's closed, and there are no workers in sight. David notices a hotel nearby, so he decides to go there to ask about the worker. When they enter the hotel, they find the reception area completely empty. Suddenly, they hear loud screaming coming from the lounge. Amy gets scared and wants to leave, but David insists on staying and calls out to the hotel manager, who emerges from the lounge looking surprised to see them. When David asks about the screaming, the manager turns off the TV and explains that he was just watching a movie. David then asks about the gas station worker, and the manager explains that his shift ended, so the gas station was closed, and they won't be able to reach him until the next day. When the manager learns that their car is still having issues, he suggests they spend the night at the hotel and offers them a full suite for the price of a regular room. David feels it's a good offer, especially since he's been driving for a long time and needs some rest. He agrees, and the manager introduces himself as Mason before taking David and Amy to the suite they'll be staying in. When they enter the room, they're shocked to find it old and infested with bugs. David tries to justify it to Amy by saying that the room is cheap compared to its size, and with so few guests, the hotel probably doesn't bother with maintenance. The couple sits down and talks. Amy mentions that they should have informed their families about their divorce, but David tells her he didn't want to ruin the party, so he postponed the conversation. As they continue their discussion, David starts feeling hurt because Amy refuses to open up about her pain, which frustrates him even more. At that moment, the room's phone rings. When Amy answers, no one is on the other end. Then they hear loud banging on their door. David gets up to open it, but no one is there. The phone rings again, and this time the banging on the door gets louder, along with knocking on the door that separates their room from the adjacent one. David starts thinking that whoever is in the next room is messing with them. He leaves their room and knocks on the next door, but no one answers. Frustrated, he goes to complain to Mason, telling him that the people in the next room are disturbing them. Mason looks confused and tells him that there aren't any other guests in the hotel besides them. When David insists on his claim, Mason suggests that it could be some teenagers who snuck into the hotel to have some fun. He assures David that he'll go check the room himself. David suggests Mason take one of the weapons hanging in the reception area to protect himself in case the people inside are armed. David returned to the room and reassured Amy that Mason would handle the problem. However, at that moment, Amy was extremely anxious and asked David if they could go back to the car and wait for the gas station to open. But David refused, saying that he needed to rest so he could continue driving. David then turned on the video player in the room, and the first tape he played was a horror movie showing a group of masked men torturing two people in a brutal way. David turned off the tape and started playing another one, only to discover it was similar to the first, with the masked men torturing and killing some girls. But this time, David was shocked when he realized that the room in the video was the exact same room they were staying in. He called Amy to watch the video, and she shuddered when she realized the same terrifying truth. David quickly searched the room and discovered a set of hidden cameras. At that point, he was certain that something terrible was about to happen. Suddenly, the power went out, and David realized that Mason knew they had discovered the cameras. David ran around the room looking for an escape route, but he found that the bathroom window was nailed shut. He decided they should escape through the door, and told Amy they needed to run as fast as they could and hide in the woods. But as soon as they stepped out of the room, they found masked men surrounding them. They had no choice but to run back inside. David stood behind the door to block the masked men from entering, while Amy spotted one of them standing in front of the window. She was terrified and stepped back from opening it. In that moment, the pounding on the door stopped. David and Amy agreed that he would go out and call the police from the payphone to ask for help. He told them that strange people were chasing them at the hotel, trying to kill them. But David was shocked when the person on the other end of the line knew his name. Before David could fully process what had happened, he saw a car speeding toward him, smashing the phone booth. David ran back to the room and barely made it inside before being killed. He told Amy that the gang controlled everything in the town, even the police phone lines. David began searching the room for any weapon to defend themselves with, but he lost hope when he couldn't find anything useful. He broke the mirror and took a shard to use as a weapon. During this time, David covered all the surveillance cameras and told Amy that their every move and conversation was being monitored, so they had to speak quietly to avoid being overheard. He explained that he had watched the tapes in the room to look for weaknesses in the gang, but he discovered something else entirely. The gang members appeared in the room suddenly without entering through the door. This meant there was another entrance they could use to sneak into the room. David continued searching the room until he found a hidden door in the bathroom floor. At that moment, they heard the sound of a car approaching the hotel, and they saw a driver get out. Initially, David was suspicious and feared that the driver might be part of the gang, but after seeing the man's appearance, he felt he was just a regular person. They called out to him, asking for help. The driver saw David and Amy and approached their room. But suddenly, two masked men appeared behind him. David and Amy tried to warn the driver, but Mason appeared with a set of videotapes, handing them to the driver, and told him that the people in the room were the new victims. That's when David and Amy realized that the driver was part of the gang and had no intention of helping them. David decided they needed to escape the room as quickly as possible. He grabbed Amy, and they escaped through the hidden door in the bathroom, only to find themselves in a dark, eerie tunnel. David and Amy continued sneaking through the tunnel until they came across a large group of rats. David urged Amy to stay calm and not scream, no matter what. She managed to hold herself together and continued on despite the terror she was feeling. Eventually, they reached another door in the tunnel. When they opened it, They were shocked to find themselves in the hotel's lounge, which Mason had turned into a surveillance room to monitor all the hotel rooms and watch his victims. At that moment, Amy notices a working phone, so she quickly calls the police and asks for help. But before she can tell them where they are, they hear a sound getting closer to the room, so they go back down into the tunnel. When Mason enters the room, he's shocked to discover the tunnel, which makes him furious. He cuts the phone line and orders 2 of the masked men to go after them into the tunnel. Meanwhile, David finds another gate in the tunnel, and when he opens it, they find themselves inside the gas station next to the hotel. That's when they realize that even the gas station attendant is part of the gang. At that point, Amy breaks down from everything that's happening, so David tries to calm her down and tells her that things will get better once they're out of this nightmare, assuring her that he's not going to divorce her, and that they'll fix their lives. Amy agrees with him, and hopes they'll make it out of the hotel alive so they can continue their lives together. At that moment, the 2 see a police officer heading toward the hotel. This time, David is sure that the officer must be part of the gang, even though Amy tries to convince him that maybe he traced her call and came to save them. But David still doesn't believe her, remembering that the first time he called the police, one of the gang members answered. Meanwhile, it turns out that the officer is actually a real cop, who arrived at the hotel after tracing Amy's distress call. Mason lies to the officer, telling him there are no guests at the hotel, but the officer insists on searching the rooms. Mason goes to get the keys, and David and Amy are surprised to find their room open. When the officer enters, he finds the room in chaos and sees the tapes showing the murders and torture that happened in the same room. The officer quickly leaves the room, terrified. When David and Amy see the officer's reaction, they're sure he's a real cop, not part of the gang. So they quickly leave the gas station and run to the officer, who puts them in his car to escape. But at that moment, they realize the car won't start. The officer gets out to check what's wrong, and suddenly, a masked man appears from behind and kills him. At that moment, David and Amy run back to the room again. This time, David decides to confront the gang and take them down instead of running away, believing it's the only way to guarantee their safety. But before doing that, he thinks about protecting Amy first. He breaks the bathroom window, tears a piece of Amy's clothing, and hangs it up. Then he opens the ceiling of the room and helps her climb up to hide, telling her not to make any noise and not to come down until she sees him. He tells her he's going to the hotel lobby to grab the weapons there and use them to fight the gang. Before he leaves, he admits to her that he loves her and doesn't want to leave her or give up on her. As soon as David opens the door, he's met by one of the masked men. They fight until David is knocked to the ground. Mason shows up with a camera and starts filming what's happening. At that moment, Amy is watching everything unfold, heartbroken over her husband who's been lost. Morning comes, and Amy wakes up still on the ceiling. She climbs down quietly and tries to leave the room. When she steps outside, she finds David's body in front of her. She approaches him, crying, but suddenly, one of the masked men appears and attacks her. Amy runs as fast as she can until she reaches Mason's car, starts it up, and tries to escape. But the masked man manages to get in through the sunroof. Amy loses control of the car and crashes into the hotel, only to discover she has run over one of the other masked men, killing him. With that, she's taken down 2 of them. Amy quickly escapes from the car and enters the hotel lobby, searching for any weapons. But Mason appears behind her, hits her, and tries to choke her to death. Amy runs from him and searches for the weapon she dropped. In the last moment, before Mason reaches her, Amy uses the weapon to kill him, ending his life. Finally, Amy wakes up from the nightmare she's been living through all night, but by then, she's already lost her husband. When she goes to say goodbye to him one last time before leaving, she notices he's still breathing. Hope is reignited inside her, making her believe their lives could still get better. She quickly runs and calls the police again, asking for help and giving them their location. She sits next to David, waiting for the rescue team that will save their lives. And that's the end of today's movie. We hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget, if you liked the video, to support us with a like and subscribe,